German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says they wouldn't be able to move mountains. But G7 leaders have at least tried to move the needle, especially for Ukraine.
We
will continue to drive up economic and political costs of this war for President Putin and his regime. Without a fair agreement with Ukraine, the sanctions will all continue to be there. To that end, it's important to stand together. Also, during the long haul, that this will surely be.
Aiming to cut the Kremlin's streams of revenue, the leaders of the 7 economic powers have suggested fresh sanctions targeting Russia's arms industry, gold exports and a possible twin price cap on its oil and gas. Yet none of these appear as firm commitments in the G7's final communique. Boosting their support for Ukraine, they've also committed $30 billion in financial aid this year, with Scholz suggesting to set up a plan for the country's reconstruction. They've also promised to help Ukrainian farmers and to provide $4.5 billion to fight global hunger. Experts, however, say that's a fraction of the necessary minimum to solve a worsening global food crisis, an issue which many affected regions blame Western sanctions for. To convince them otherwise, Olaf Scholz invited leaders of 5 emerging democracies to the summit, some maintaining close ties with Russia.
We will also resolutely counter the Russian narrative that this is actually a conflict where only the West is condemning the attack and otherwise the world is watching what Russia is actually doing. That's not the case.
For a summit normally dominated by challenges of the climate crisis, however, it has provided few solutions. And critics say rather than moving forward, the G7 took a step back by allowing exceptions to climate goals they had set themselves. The G7 has come to a close with a strong show of unity, continued solidarity with Ukraine and a determination to further isolate Russia. But some critics believe many of the measures announced are only a promise and expect leaders' symbolic demonstrations to be followed by action. As the war and with it several humanitarian crises continue, the leaders of some of the world's richest nations are leaving the Bavarian Alps with most of the issues unresolved.
We can only call this a historic failure. We are in a crisis of extreme social inequality, a climate crisis. There are millions of people in the world who are suffering from hunger, and the G7 haven't managed to deliver concrete commitments.
All eyes will now be on the G20 summit in Indonesia in November, where they will sit face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Sibel Karkus, TRT World, Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Germany.